Welcome to the very first episode of Behind the Fruit. This podcast is about the people behind the fresh produce industry, the leaders, the innovators, the decision makers who shape how fruit gets from field to table around the world. Behind the Fruit isn't about supply chains or farming methods, though. It's about people, the journeys, the choices, and the lessons that sit behind every role in fresh produce. Now, normally your host will be Lucy Robinson, founder and CEO of LCR International. For this first episode, though, I'm stepping in as host so we can turn the tables and hear her story. Lucy's built LCR into a leading global executive search firm for fresh produce, connecting businesses with senior talent across every function and every continent. So today we're going to delve into her career journey and find out about what she's learned about leadership along the way. So Lucy, welcome to your very own podcast.
Hi, Beth. Thanks for having me on my own podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. So let's just dive in with your history then. So when you look back, what moment or decision set you on the path to recruitment?
Yeah, so it was quite a long time ago now, but yeah, essentially, I think like most people in recruitment fell into recruitment. So not that many people choose recruitment as a career. It just kind of happens. But yeah, I was 19 and I knew somebody who had just got their first job in recruitment for a very small local recruitment agency. We literally covered it was like 5 mile radius, maybe a bit further, but very, very much the local area. And yeah, and it was recruiting for kind of anything and everything. A very low level, like sort of your junior admin and various roles. But essentially that's how it started. So I joined that business, and then that was, probably not too far off 20 years ago now. So showing my age. But but things have changed a lot since then, as you can imagine.
So why fresh produce then? What drew you to specialise in this sector?
Yeah, so I mean, I specialised in other sectors for quite a long time. I did very much like the office support sector for a long time. Yeah, moved to actually worked and lived in Melbourne and recruited for some corporate roles there. But then it was actually when I came back to the UK, I found myself in a position recruiting within the food manufacturing space in the UK, mainly for manager and director level roles, for factory managers, technical managers, etc. And within that, it was included fresh produce. So that was part of the clients and the industry that I was working within at the time. But fresh produce is completely different to other food categories. So at the time it was other things, everything really from, it could be confectionery, ready meals, a bit of a mix. But fresh produce is so different. And I just really felt drawn to the industry. I think as many people do, it's very much a world on its own. People tend to, I think we've talked about this before, but they'll be drawn in. They often don't tend to leave. They tend to stay in the industry for life. So really had the idea of setting up something that was just purely focused on an industry that I love. For that reason, I didn't have the same passion for the meat industry, for example. Just doesn't not the same for me. So
yeah, I think sometimes it just comes from your heart, doesn't it? And you just know, like when you feel it, you just know. What were some of the turning points or challenges that shaped your journey before launching LCR and going out on your own?
So actually, when I was in working for my previous employer, did at the time launch a division, a global fresh produce division within that business. There were a lot of learnings, there were a lot of challenges. Didn't fully work, it took a lot longer than I expected, and there was a lot of things that I had to adjust. I was learning the exact market I was targeting, the types of positions, the price points, how to essentially be successful within a certain niche market globally. So there was a lot I had to learn, and essentially it didn't actually work out at that time. So I decided to launch LCR. By that point, I had learned a lot and I had a good idea of, I was 100% confident it would work. I knew that I could do it. I just needed to adjust and keep going. So essentially, that's kind of when I decided to launch LCR.
That's pretty brave. So it's not like, so you're like, well, it didn't work under somebody else, so I'm just going to go out and do it by myself, completely by myself. That's
yeah. I mean, everyone thought I was a bit mad. My family are like, really? Like, are you actually doing this? Like, what are you doing? Kind of thing. But But I think when you just have that ultimate belief that you know that it could work, like there was no plan B. It was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I had quite a bit of almost success. Like I'd had offers out and the candidates had, rejected the offer, or there were things that like it was close, I could feel it was getting there. I just hadn't quite got to that point. It just needed more time and some tweaks.
Mm.
Yeah, that's
So
essentially
those early things
when you.
talk 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 to you about sort of resilience, and sort of you almost sort of built up that resilience muscle in the business before you started out for yourself, really.
Yeah, and I think recruitment, you do have to be very resilient because I suppose ultimately we're dealing with people, and you don't know what people are always thinking, what they're going to do. You could they have the most amazing search, and then the person decides actually they don't want to take this job. They don't want to relocate, and you have to start again. So I think you have to be very resilient anyway within the industry and just kind of take it as it comes. I think the best recruiters are, and you still, it can be very, very tough and lots of ups and downs, but yeah, you just have to always keep going, and then it always comes good in the end.
Yeah, just have faith and keep
Yeah.
going. What gap did you see in the market when you decided to start LCR International? Sort of what was the inspiration behind it? I know that you sort of you've just explained about what happened in your previous employment, but
Mhm.
what was the inspiration there?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned obviously about the love for fresh produce and just being drawn to the industry. Another part was looking at the global aspect. So I really wanted to develop an international search firm. I love working with different cultures. I've done lots of travel myself, and yeah, just really had a desire to work with various countries around the world and not just be exclusive within the UK market. And it just went hand in hand with fresh produce. Many companies are global themselves. They have multiple locations around the world. And I noticed a gap. There were no fresh produce search firms that were purely specialized in fresh produce that were covering the global market.
I know that you travelled a bit before you went out on your own, didn't you? So I think did that sort of help? Was that part of the inspiration?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, before I moved back to the UK, I was wondering about working in different countries. I'd looked into it, was I going to relocate to South America? Or I think at one point it was Dubai, I was looking at different options, but did decide to settle in the UK and thought, how can I take my love for travel and culture, see the fresh produce industry, and like, bring that all together essentially. I was aware of other search firms that had also grown internationally in other industries. That was something that I just thought, well, yeah, I can do this as well. Why not?
Yeah. Okay. And so, what do you think has been the key to LCR's growth in the last 5 years?
So I mean, the international piece has been great because it means that we've been able to work with international firms that can come to us for all of their global hiring. So actually, a big part of our growth has been through existing business. So we haven't needed to be purely focused on bringing in new business, which a lot of search firms do. It's not always repeat business, particularly in your typical contingent model. So we transitioned the business to being a full retained search partner to our clients, which has meant that we've been able to have over a 90% success rate on all of our searches, and therefore meant that we can retain our clients. They're coming back to us consistently. This year we've grown 40% so far versus last year, and it's been all through existing business. There's been a couple of new clients we've brought on, but yeah, it's been very much existing business. So it's really about the care that we put into the work, making sure that we understand the clients, that we have the best process, always looking at improving our process. What can we do better? And caring about the candidates as well, because they can get forgotten about a lot in recruitment. Sometimes candidates are just, yeah, they're often ghosted. They feel that they're not important. So for us, it's about really providing the best service to the candidates as well as the clients. And don't get me wrong, on the candidate side, I'm not saying that we've been absolutely perfect, but it is what we are striving to achieve.
It's that people first attitude, isn't it? Just kind of, clients first and candidates first, and putting that before. 'Cause it's quite interesting that you didn't say one specific business technique or one specific like marketing technique, or it really is just about making sure that you put the people first, like
Yeah.
every juncture. So yeah, that's really good. So with that in mind, what makes a client relationship last years? Like, what do you think, keeps those clients coming back?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think it is one side our ability and willingness as well to work in any country. I speak to a lot of other search firms that would be very nervous about recruiting in countries that are outside of their comfort zone, and maybe they don't have a network. But for us, it is really about the process, and we know that with the right process, we can be successful in a new country. I mean, we've done it time and time again over the past 5 years. We've just added countries to the list continuously. So yeah, so I think that is one thing. And then just maintaining those relationships. So we make sure we attend the exhibitions, the conferences in person, meeting in person. Yeah, it's not always about what project have you got for us now. It's looking into the future and working out how we can be a more of a strategic partner to them. So not necessarily just for hiring, it could be to help them with understanding the compensation that they should be paying their employees or new hires, or it could be helping them to understand the market or organization development. So it's not just about hiring, it's offering more of a consultative service in that way. And just building relationships. It's such a relationship driven industry. I mean, I can't speak for other industries, but it really is. It is about the people, and it's about who you know. So that has been, super important to make sure that you're getting onto a certain level with people and making sure that you're approachable as well.
Okay, so what is something that you've learned about hiring in this sector that you think outsiders often underestimate?
I think outsiders would underestimate the nuances within the industry and how different each product is. So I think people will be shocked to understand that, for example, someone who might be, I don't know, specializing within selling apples to the retailers, for example, can't always just transition straight into selling, I don't know, vegetables to even to retail. They are different products. They have different buyers, different price points. So I think people don't necessarily understand that. They come from outside of the industry. And then that relates directly into hiring. That means that companies often, they may not have time to train somebody who doesn't understand the product, who doesn't have the right contacts or maybe the technical knowledge, which is where we often come in, because we need to then find very specific skill sets from a very small talent pool in a specific location, for example, which isn't always easy to do. So, yeah.
The needle in a haystack
Yeah,
situation.
exactly.
Mm.
Yes.
So, what traits or skills are your clients asking for in leaders in 2025 that they maybe weren't prioritizing a few years ago?
So I think something we've noticed recently is more so when I say soft skills, it'll be things like empathy is coming through quite a lot. We've had a few clients really ask for someone who's a good listener, so a leader that can listen. So it's not about who can talk the most or shout the loudest. It's the person who could build relationships and understand their employees, and through listening and through spending time with them. So I think that's something that has changed over time. I think the global aspect as well is becoming more prominent. So somebody who has managed teams globally and understands different cultures, we're seeing that a lot more. Someone who hasn't done that might struggle to transition into a very complex position if they've never worked with various cultures. If they've only worked in one country, for example, it might be a bit of a shock to the system to understand that they've got to learn the products, they've got to learn the industry, the market, and they've got to learn new cultures, for example. So it can be quite a lot. So that's something we're seeing coming up quite frequently as well.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that that's a change, that we're experiencing more now as opposed to sort of 5 years ago?
I think as more companies grow globally, I imagine, you get a lot more bigger players as companies expand and start to open locations in new countries. for example. A lot of companies are going more direct to retail themselves, so moving away from using the middleman, essentially. So they're going direct from the grower to the retailer, meaning that companies will want to be opening their own farms in new locations, whether it's their own or partner farmers. So we're finding that for that reason, they then need to be able to have someone who can manage various global locations as well. The industry has been transitioning in that way for quite some time now, but it's not, I won't say it's a brand new thing, but it's definitely the shift that's been happening over recent years.
Okay, brilliant. So fresh produce, it doesn't give leaders much breathing room. So how does that pressure show up in the way companies hire?
I mean, one thing we are noticing more and more, and again, I think this is to do with, like you say, that the pressure, the travel requirements, just the availability and time people have. So the length of processes seems to be getting longer, which apparently, I mean, I have actually spoken to other search firms to see if they're experiencing the same, and they actually are. So it isn't, I wouldn't say it's directly related to fresh produce. So it's something that we are looking into and trying to figure out. But it does seem to be that the processes are getting longer, people have less availability, trying to get multiple stakeholders to interview at the same time is quite complex. So often it might mean that actually the candidate has to have, 3 or 4 meetings individually with people just to get it in the diary. So that's something that I think prolonging the process can have a negative effect. I'm not saying it always does. We've had very long processes that have come to a really good result. But I suppose the risk is if the candidate is in other processes, they could get snapped up by another company, or sometimes they can get fed up as well, if it goes on too long. I don't see that too often though, but it's something companies need to be aware of to try and not make the process too long, essentially.
That's interesting because I suppose I would assume that if the process goes on longer, I would just kind of naturally assume they'd almost guarantee like a better result. But I hadn't even thought about the fact that, candidates are waiting, they could drop off during that time. And I suppose, even though that might, as you say, getting more stakeholders in a room for an interview or, maybe even, oh no, I need to ask some more questions. So the client's coming back for more, might think, oh, it's more in depth and thorough, but actually, there needs to be a balance, I suppose, between speed and, finding the right person. So
Yeah,
it's really
exactly.
interesting.
And I think as well, so I think the main issues are probably when candidates are in other processes, but also other things can happen in that time. So they could get a promotion in their current business, and all of a sudden, they're no longer looking. We see that quite frequently. Or something changes in their personal situation, which means actually, well, do they want to take the job? Whereas if it had happened 2 months earlier, maybe that wouldn't have been the case. So yeah, there are different things that we're seeing, and like you say, it is getting the balance. It's not always that straightforward because sometimes they do need to meet all of the stakeholders and they do need to go through the entire process. But it's just balancing that, like you say, which can be really tricky.
So you've spoken with many executives across the industry. What themes come up most often when they talk about their biggest challenges?
I'm just trying to think actually what would be.
So from a candidate side, what would you say candidates say there are the biggest challenges? You mentioned that sometimes, they've been ghosted or they've had a bad experience from other search firms. Do they ever sort of come to you sort of quite jaded and, sort of, I'd rather stay where I am. So say that, you've got a passive candidate, well, I'd rather stay where I am than go through that process again. Do you hear that a lot?
Yeah, yes. So occasionally, there are people that are almost been burnt, let's say, by a process or something previously. So like you say, they come across they can be quite jaded. So you have to then build the trust. I think as well, actually, one thing it's good to mention is within hiring. So so a lot of companies are talking about historically maybe they've been able to do most of their hiring through networking, maybe through advertising, but the methods they were once using are no longer working. So it could be that the same candidates almost are, the people in the industry are not massively changing. So it's like they've met everybody, they know everybody. Yeah, there's nobody else available. So we're seeing more and more of them coming to or going to search firms because the methods that they used to use are no longer working. So that is one challenge that they have. Yeah. But then on the candidate side, also just finding the right position. There's not always a ton of positions available for each individual's niche skill set. And we're seeing gaps in their experience, particularly at a senior level. I would say 6 or 9 months gap in their career is actually quite normal. And I've seen clients actually sort of be quite hesitant to hire somebody who's got a 6-month gap in their CV. But that is actually not that long for somebody at a senior level. It really does take, in some instances, a good 6 months. If they've been made redundant or there's been an unfortunate circumstance where they've had to leave their employer, and 6 months is very average, I'd say, to have a gap. What we see. So I'd definitely encourage employers to not worry about a 6-month gap in somebody's CV. Definitely.
And I suppose also for candidates not to worry about it, because that's part
Yeah.
of your role is to reassure those clients that, if you are working with a candidate who's got that gap, you can, reassure them that actually, that's
Yeah.
normal. And
there's nothing wrong with them. It's normal. It does just take this long. That is
Yeah.
just how the industry goes at the moment. I think, a lot longer can be, maybe red flags, but around 6, 8, 9 months, something around that, I wouldn't be concerned personally. Everyone's got a different opinion on it, of course.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Talking about the future, then, what excites you most about the future of LCR?
So the future of LCR. So I'm really excited as we continue to grow. So we will always work with fresh produce growers and exporters, but we are starting to do more and more in adjacent sectors in terms of ag tech. So companies that supply, whether it's technology or equipment or services into the fresh produce industry. So that's really a growing market for us, as well as working closely with investors. So it could be private equity or venture capitalist companies that will invest in the agricultural industry. So working with them, with their portfolio clients. So these are both, growth areas for us. I'd say I can't imagine that we will grow massively now in terms of the countries that we operate in. So we've just placed in country number 21, which is amazing.
Wow.
So really, really grateful for that.
Pride of age.
Yeah, but I suppose there's always, there's the fresh produce almost like hubs around the world, where I imagine that we'll do the vast majority of our hires moving forward. And I'm sure there'll be the odd extra country or new country thrown in here and there. But I think that's mainly what we're excited about. Developing teams in other locations. So I think people know that we do have teams working for us in both South America and Asia. I think growing those in the future, or maybe through different languages as well, is something that's exciting.
And you've also just formed an alliance with another company as well?
Yes. Yeah, we have. So with ELR Executive. So they're a search firm located in Sydney, Australia. And they've historically worked with both the food and produce industries across Australia and APAC. So Australia is a country, Australia and New Zealand, that we would love to do more in, but obviously time zones are definitely a challenge. So I think we've got about between a 9 and 11 hour time difference, depending on the time of the year. So working with ELR means that we can, let's say if we're working with a client in the US and they want to hire in Australia, that means that they've got, us as a point of contact in the UK, but then they've got somebody in Australia that's able to actually assess and interview candidates for them who understands the industry, and the same across APAC as well. So we've completed our first search together in New Zealand. That was really successful. Candidate has accepted and is joining. So really excited about doing more work with ELR moving forward.
That's brilliant. It's a really good way of solving that problem with the time zones. I think lots of global firms struggle with. So that's brilliant. So how do you see executive hiring in fresh produce changing over the next 5 years?
So I do see, and this is something that's already started, but companies seeing the benefit of moving away from working with search firms on more of a transactional way. So historically, it can be very transactional, and send a CV, let's see if it fits and make a hire. Moving to more of a retained partnership, the success rate in a retained partnership is so much higher. You're looking at, typically we are 90% success rate, and that is normal for a retained search, whereas your typical contingent model only has about a 20% success rate. I think companies are more open to this, and once they see the benefits and see how it works, they'll be doing more and more in that way and partnering with search firms to help them. Typically for, I'd say, their niche or senior level hires, of course, companies will always rely on either their local search firms or local recruiters or even internal talent acquisition for the majority of their hires, and that makes complete sense. So it tends to be when it's a complex search that needs a direct headhunt, essentially, where we come in. So I think that is something that we'll see a shift. Historically, these searches have been run for more your C-suite executive level positions, but now we're using the same process and implementing it to your mid-level niche complex hires, essentially.
What do you hope this podcast will bring to people working in the sector?
Yeah, so I think, so when we were looking at an idea for a podcast and trying to decide, exactly which avenue to go down, there's loads of podcasts out there which are amazing around the industry itself, the trends, just giving people advice on what it's like within the industry, whether it's talking about certain articles or news, for example. What I've not been able to find is a podcast that is about the people in the industry, and that is something that is really important. The people are a key part of all businesses, so both the employees and then new hires. So this will give really two things. So firstly, the opportunity for leaders, founders, and any key people within the industry to firstly share their story. So how they progress within the industry, how they progress their careers for others to learn from, but then also around hiring in the industry. So the challenges, any tips, for example, maybe what the future holds. So it gives them the opportunity to provide advice and others to listen and learn from others. In recruitment, and getting the right people is just such a critical part of all businesses. I think it's important that we share and help each other out in that respect.
Yeah, and I love that because I think it's really showing that, everything's about people ultimately at the end of the day, isn't it? So, and I think sometimes, especially in these kind of the corporate world, we sort of forget about that. We get so sort of focused on the business message, and, really there's always somebody and there's people behind that business. It's a organic thing, isn't it? And I've got some quick fire questions
All
for
right.
you. So favorite fruit and why?
Yeah, I feel like it changes quite a lot, probably depending on the season, maybe. But at the moment, I would say raspberries I'm getting at the moment are amazing. So yeah, I think they're in season. But yeah, it's a good time for raspberries. So I'm buying them a lot at the moment, and blackberries as well. So yeah, right now they are my go-to fruits. Although one punnet does not last me very long. It's literally gone. But yeah, no,
They're
they're
easy to
very
smash
great.
through, aren't they? And
Yeah,
so
they
if
are.
you ask that question for other people, you're going to judge them if they say bananas.
Yes. Yeah. No, I don't do bananas. Yeah, I'm not I don't think I like bananas, but I'm just not I'm not a
Yeah.
yeah.
It's one of those ones you wouldn't expect anyone to say it's their favorite, would you? So yeah,
No.
I think raspberries and blackberries and berries at this time of year. I can see that.
Yes,
And
definitely.
okay, so one thing you can't start your day without.
Yeah, so coffee, definitely. Although I am trying to push back the time when I have my first coffee, because apparently there's benefits to that. Although it doesn't always work, so it didn't this morning. So yeah, but I always have a coffee first thing in the morning. Although I do need to limit the amount of coffee I have, because more than two, and I'll be up all night. Yeah,
Into the walls.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
And if you were mentoring the next generation of leaders in executive search, what's the one lesson you'd want them to remember?
Probably similar to what I was talking about before when it comes to the transactional approach versus more consultative. So many recruiters or even companies that would describe themselves as search firms are just working in a transactional way. So it's like, interviewing candidate, next, just not focusing on the bigger picture or the future. So I think, yeah, essentially that. So making sure that you're developing relationships, getting to know people, not just thinking about today. It's like, how can I build something for the future? How can I build relationships? How can I understand the industry? How can I provide a service that is more than just filling a job, understanding what other needs the company might have, or even on the candidate side, what else they might need. Can I help you with your CV? Can I provide you with some advice for if you're going for interviews? Like, let me know what you need. And then I find that you get a lot more back from that. But it is very common for within the industry for people to be like, just the here and now, and that's all they focus on. But you really need to be thinking about the future and the bigger picture, which is something that I honestly didn't used to do. It's something I've had to learn myself. But yeah, that's definitely something I would advise.
And I've got one more question from a mentoring perspective.
Okay.
You've obviously grown your business as a mum with small
Yeah.
kids. What advice would you give to other women out there that are thinking, oh, I don't know if I could do it when I've got little kids and I've got, how do you do it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is difficult, but then I think everything's just can be difficult, can't it? Just working a jobs can be difficult with young kids. So I think if you really want to do it, just go for it and you'll work around it. I mean, I suppose the positives are having your own business. You've got the flexibility to work around the kids, to pick them up from school, do what you need. If you need to work evenings, you work evenings. If you need to work weekends, you work weekends. So I think that, I mean, for me, I didn't let that stop me. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to dive in, set up a business and just make it work. Yeah, I think, and it can be very tough at times juggling things, but is it more tough than being an employee in a business? I don't know. Maybe it is. I don't know. But yeah, but maybe it's not as well. So yeah, so I think just
It's
go.
worth it in the end.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, completely worth it. And I mean, I've been quite lucky that I've got a good family support, which does help a lot. So yeah, I don't know if it would have been quite the same if I didn't have the same network that I have. But yeah, I've been very fortunate in that respect.
Good. Okay, so that's it for our first episode of Behind the Fruits. Lucy, thank you for letting us turn the tables on you and putting you in the hot seat. I really know that future episodes are going to be really useful for people in the industry. So have you got any closing statements?
No, I just say if everybody can, tune in. We've got some really interesting guests coming on, CEOs, founders, key leaders within the industry that'll be sharing their story and sharing their tips and advice, etc. Yeah, just hope people tune in, and I'm excited.
Brilliant. So from next time, Lucy will be in the host chair. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, then just follow the podcast, maybe share it with a colleague and join us for the next episodes. Thanks for tuning in and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Beth. Okay,
Thanks.
bye.